Donald Trump flipped 6 states in the 2024 election, and in this video, we'll be taking a look at 5 more that the Republican Party can take in 2028. The former and future president completely changed the electoral landscape. Not only did he hold on to North Carolina that he won in 2020, but he also flipped 6 additional states, giving him all 7 of the competitive races: Nevada, Arizona, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Georgia. All of them switched from Biden in 2020 to Trump in 2024. However, Trump and the GOP also made incredible gains in other area states where you don't see an actual flip, but where the margin of victory for Democrats shrank by quite a bit. Just look at New Jersey, for example, a state that Joe Biden carried by 16% in 2020. 4 years later, Kamala Harris carries it by just 6. That's a 10-point swing in favor of the former president in just 4 years. And so we will now be taking a look at the top 5 states that Republicans can win in 2028 that they did not win in 2024. So we're basically going to add to Trump's incredible 312 electoral vote victory, which is a modern day landslide. So we're going to start off down in New Mexico. The state is worth 5 electoral votes. It hasn't received too much attention since the early 2000s. 2004 was the last time the state voted red in favor of George W. Bush by less than 1%. Obama then flipped it in 2008, and it's been blue ever since. However, even though Biden carried the state by 11 points in 2020, Kamala Harris won it by just half that margin in 2024, defeating the former president by just 6. As Democrats continue to struggle with Hispanic voters, you are seeing their coalition start to break down in New Mexico, the only state in the country with a Hispanic majority electorate. Cities like Albuquerque and Santa Fe simply were not as liberal as they were when Biden was at the top of the Democratic ticket. And so Kamala Harris has really put Democrats behind. Even though she did well in Colorado, the margin only decreased by 2 points compared to Biden's performance from 2020. New Mexico, her performance was pretty abysmal. It was called a lot later than expected, and New Mexico has been seeing a generally rightward shift over the last few years. I mean, Barack Obama won it by 15 points in 2008, but by the time 2012 rolled around, that margin had dropped to 10 points. With Clinton on the ballot, it went down again to 8. Joe Biden improved off of it slightly to 11 in 2020, but now in 2024, New Mexico is barely a likely blue state, and it definitely is within reach for a Republican like J.D. Vance in 2028. So I have it as the top 5 most likely flip for Republicans in the next election. I'm going to place it into the tilt Republican category. And at number 4, we have New Jersey, which I mentioned earlier. I mean, Democrats' performance here was terrible in 2024. It could not have been any worse for Kamala Harris. I mean, New York took a significant shift towards the right as well. Trump lost it by 23 points to Joe Biden. Against Kamala Harris, he loses by just 12. I mean, this entire region shifted to the right, much like the rest of the country. I mean, just look at what's happened here. Really, the only prominently blue area is in the Atlanta area in Georgia. Everywhere else across the map, whether it's the East Coast, the West Coast, or the South, every single county essentially shifted to the right with only a few exceptions. And so looking at the tri-state area, this is where we see significant shifts. I mean, the Bronx, 22% more Republican. Queens, 21%. These are some of the most liberal regions in the entire country. Democrats went from winning by 60-point margins now down to just 20 and 30. And so New Jersey was dragged along with New York in favor of Trump. It is going to shift more and more to the right. A state that was solid blue just one election cycle ago is now one of the most competitive races in the entire country. New Jersey will definitely be one to watch in 4 years, and so it's definitely on the list as a prospective flip for the Republicans. It is also going to be tilt red on this map. Moving on now to number 3, we have the Commonwealth of Virginia, a state that voted for Democrats in all 5 of the last 5 presidential elections. Obama in 2008 and 2012, Hillary Clinton in 2016, Biden in 2020. He won by a double-digit margin, which was actually quite impressive. It was stronger than Obama's 6-point margin from 2008. But, of course, in 2024, Kamala Harris has really lowered the bar for Democrats. She won Virginia by 6%. This is a winnable state for Republicans, especially after the success we saw for Glenn Youngkin in 2021. He was elected a Republican governor, the first time a Republican won a major statewide office in the state in over a decade. And so if he is anywhere near the ticket, Republicans will have a very good chance at finally winning Virginia on the presidential level, and in 2028, it would be the first time in 24 years. George W. Bush was the last Republican to carry the state, and the biggest shift in 2024 came in Northern Virginia in the Alexandria region. This is the region right under Washington, D.C., and is the main reason why Virginia votes for Democrats, as all of the rural areas in the state do tend to trend Republican. And so Virginia is definitely winnable for the GOP in 2028. Even if they don't win it, it's going to be recognized as one of the most competitive states in the country. It is going to be a top battleground. It was not seen that way in 2020 or 2024, but in 2028, it certainly will, especially given just how competitive it was with Kamala Harris in 2024. And so Virginia will also be tilt Republican. This is the third possible flip out of 5. And so we're now left with just the top 2. I mean, Republicans are already at 344 electoral votes. After this victory for Trump in 2024, Democrats are in the worst position they've been in arguably since the Reagan era. I mean, when Bush won in 2000 and 2004, they were still close elections. Democrats definitely had the opportunity to come back and recover, and of course they did that in 2008. They also won in 2012. 2016, it was a crushing blow for Republicans, but they felt confident going to 2020. Joe Biden won the election, but now in 2024, Trump wins the popular vote, something that isn't supposed to happen. No Republican has done that since George W. Bush in 2004. And so today, the map looks very different than what it looked like even just 2 months ago before the election. Nobody thought that New Hampshire would even be that competitive, but it is the second most likely flip on our list. New Hampshire hasn't gone red since 2000. George W. Bush, in his first election, was the last Republican to win it. He did lose it 4 years later to John Kerry in 2004. However, looking at New Hampshire as a whole, it definitely was pretty blue during the Biden era when he won it by 7.4%. Jeanne Shaheen was elected easily in the Senate, and so was Maggie Hassan in 2022. But 4 years later, New Hampshire becomes incredibly competitive, with Kamala Harris winning by just 3%. It's not as narrow as Clinton's margin of victory from 2016, though. She won it by less than half a percentage point, but Kamala Harris certainly did expose the fact that Democrats still do have a weakness in the Granite State. Joe Biden won nearly every single county. Kamala Harris's performance here was notably worse. And so New Hampshire is the second most likely flip for Republicans. This is definitely a state they can win if they pour a lot of money into it. However, with its 4 electoral votes, it is not exactly the most appealing prospect, but nevertheless, New Hampshire will become one of the most competitive races in 2028. I mean, just look at the margin, 3%. It was more competitive than states like Arizona and Nevada, which were, of course, considered to be among the 7 closest. And so New Hampshire is actually going to be lean Republican. I do see the GOP with the opportunity to win the state by just over 1%. And finally, the most likely flip for Republicans in the next election, no matter who the nominee is, whether it be J.D. Vance, Glenn Youngkin, Donald Trump Jr., those are the top names right now, but Minnesota is the #1 flip for Republicans, and this is surprising as it is the state with the longest Democratic voting streak. It hasn't gone red since 1972 and the re-election of Richard Nixon. Every single Republican, including Ronald Reagan, following 72, they all lost Minnesota, including Donald Trump, who lost it by 4% to Kamala Harris. Now, you might be wondering why I've actually put Minnesota ahead of New Hampshire on the list, as, of course, Trump only lost New Hampshire by 3 points. And the main reason is because Kamala Harris had every reason to win Minnesota by a larger margin. She was supposed to perform better than Joe Biden. Joe Biden won Minnesota by 7 points in 2020, but he wasn't running with the state's literal governor. Kamala Harris, who ran with Tim Walz, who is still the governor of Minnesota, even with him on the ticket, she barely won the state, pulling off just a 4% margin of victory. Considering that Walz was on the ticket, this is arguably a weaker victory than her victory in the Granite State. And so Minnesota will also be lean Republican, just like New Hampshire. I do see whoever the Republican nominee ends up being able to win the state by at least 1%. And so obviously this is going to be sort of a best case scenario for Republicans. In this case, Arizona would probably be likely red, and so would Nevada and Pennsylvania even. I mean, David McCormick won the Senate seat there, unseating incumbent Bob Casey. That was a huge win for the GOP. 358 electoral votes. It would be an utter landslide for Republicans, the largest victory we've seen for any candidate of any party since Obama's 365 electoral vote victory back in 2008. And considering just how polarized the country is compared to where it was in 2008, this would arguably be an even more impressive victory. And so there we have it, the top 5 most likely flips for Republicans in 2028: New Mexico, New Jersey, Virginia, New Hampshire, and Minnesota. 46 electoral votes total that could be added to Trump's 312. Thank you guys so much for watching, and make sure you like, comment, and subscribe right now for more content just like this. I also just wanted to take the time to thank you guys for the incredible support throughout 2024 as the year comes to an end. We have a lot of content lined up for the next 2 years leading up to the 2026 midterms. However, the upload schedule will be a little less intensive, probably every 2 weeks to every month. And so until then, I'll see you guys in the next video.